Hello and welcome back to Talabio's Hedge School of Farming. So Talabio, another Talabio core member, Bridget Murphy, here today from Sligo. Hi
Hello,
Bridget.
Bridget. Yeah, nice to be chatting to another Bridge.
Yes, and I am Bridget on my birth cert, so we're totally connected. Bridget's,
There you go, though.
but Bridget is the pinnacle of today's discussion because it's all about 10, 10, 20. So very excited to hear. Bridget has a great slideshow, and I'm looking forward to seeing it as well. So take it away, Bridget. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Let's see if we can just
Yes.
share the screen. Share. There we go. Good. And just give me a wave if at any time the reception goes down, because I do have a bit of a dodgy broadband. So as you can see, I have labeled this Understanding Nitrogen Reduction. And I mean, we all know that the current industrial food and agricultural systems have succeeded in supplying large volumes of cheap food to the global markets. However, there's high external input, and by that I mean seeds, inorganic fertilizers, pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, and a resource-intensive agricultural system that kicked off in the 1950s and 60s has caused massive deforestation. It's caused water pollution and scarcities, biodiversity loss, soil fertility depletion through the loss of your soil organic carbon, which includes both your living carbon, like your carbon life form organisms, and dead material. It's created high levels of greenhouse gas emissions. We see an increase in zoonotic viruses and disease, human health issues, for example, obesity, cardiovascular, and diabetes. And then some human rights issues as well, clearly around labor in picking and packaging plants. COVID has also very, very clearly highlighted the need for short supply chains of locally grown healthy food and seed sovereignty. Now, your average Irish farmer is well aware that the current system is not delivering livelihoods, as is the average EU farmer. And we see an average of 1,000 EU farmers leaving the sector daily, which is a horrific statistic. The Irish citizen doesn't have short supply chains of locally grown meat and vegetables. Well, it has the meat, but not so much the vegetables, despite paying for it many times over. So first of all, the citizen would pay as a net contributor to CAP, and then you pay again through VAT, and then you pay the fines for missing the directive targets. And lastly, there's the financial and other costs that are associated with poor health. That's an outcome of these food systems. As I've already mentioned, the environment, or more accurately, ecosystems, are on the brink of collapse. And critically, should the food-soil web collapse, the soil-food web collapse, any future regenerative or agroecological approaches won't be able to take place. So it's really important to kind of know that the cheap food and our cheap food policy is actually coming at a very high cost. It's very clear that our industrial agriculture and food systems are not serving us or the planet. Yet our resources continue to be directed towards propping up or doubling down on these broken systems. Talambio farmers will be speaking throughout the day about alternatives to this damaging and destructive industrial approach. And I think John Brennan will be speaking about the CAP and the farm-to-fork ambitions. In keeping with the theme that the land is on drugs, I'll be speaking to one of the farm-to-fork ambitions, which is a 20% reduction at least in the use of inorganic fertilizers. And what I want to show in this presentation is that the damage or the true cost of inorganic nitrogen fertilizers and why cutting it out will deliver multiple benefits to the land and to the farmer. So let's begin, and let's start it off with a quick biology refresher on nitrogen and the nitrogen cycle. And I can't see why I can't seem to make the next slide turn. This is a bit of a disaster. Rita, I have no biology lesson to start again. We've got 4 spheres that make up the Earth. We've got the hydrosphere, which are your lakes, your rivers, your streams, and your oceans. You've got your biosphere, which is all living things on the Earth, your plants, your animals, your fish, bacteria, fungi. You've got the atmosphere, which is your air, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, ozone, etc. And then you've got the lithosphere or the geosphere, which is your rocks, your mountains, and the ocean floor. Now, life on Earth as we know it, and on which the human and every other species is developed, is made possible by 3 cycles. And those 3 cycles are your water cycle, the carbon cycle, and ding dong, the nitrogen cycle. Now, Earth has the ability to keep her own cycles in balance. And as with the human body, though, a change or an imbalance to one sphere, or if one cycle impacts on the other, it then impacts on the whole. So the nitrogen cycle is a cycle by which nitrogen is converted into multiple chemical forms as it circulates between atmosphere, the terrestrial land, and your marine ecosystems. And the majority of the Earth's atmosphere, which is 78%, is an atmosphere of nitrogen. Human activities such as fossil fuel combustion, the use of artificial nitrogen fertilizers, and the release of nitrogen in wastewater have dramatically altered the global nitrogen cycle. And I'll come back to that one in a minute. So the human modification of the global nitrogen cycle, as you can see in the corner over here, where we've started making chemical nitrogen from an extractive process using fossil fuels, has a it has negatively affected both the natural environment system and also human health. So if you just have a look at this picture, you can see it summarizes very simply the global recycling of your nitrogen. It includes your industrial fertilizer production, your nitrogen fixed by your natural ecosystems, your nitrogen fixed by the oceans, nitrogen fixed by agricultural crops, and then you've got the what would you call it, your NOx gases. Now your NOx is a generic term for the nitrogen oxides that are most relevant for air pollution. So that's mainly your nitric oxide and your nitrogen dioxide and ammonia. But you would have those gases emitted from your biomass burning and from the soil, and from, you have ammonia, which is emitted by your terrestrial ecosystems. And of course, animals, say for example, cows, when they are releasing water, when they urinate, that is a dense concentration of nitrogen in one spot, and therefore most of it then gets released into the atmosphere. But you get the idea here that your nitrogen cycle, nature on her own has it in balance. We've come along and we've created this chemical nitrogen, which we have been throwing out now. As you can see from this graph, we started off sort of in about the 1930s and 1940s very slowly. And then with the conversion at the end of the Second World War, the munition factories converted over to fertilizer. So you get a very clear sense that literally from about the 1950s, there was this massive uptake in nitrogen. So for a start, one of the things that people kind of say when we talk about the need to start reducing nitrogen use, people say, but we've been doing it forever. And I think it's really important to realize that no, we haven't. But anybody that was born, say for example in 1950, 1960, 1970, they were born into the time where we were throwing out chemical nitrogen like there was no tomorrow.
Yeah, they remember in Connemara when the bags started coming in, they could put the turf in. So they had, just want to add that. Go on, Bridget.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. But it's just important to, as I say, to note that the man-made nitrogen and as we understand it, the inorganic chemical nitrogen is not something that has been around for hundreds of years. It's been around, as you can see here, for the last 70 years. Now, if we have a look at where we've been using this nitrogen, you can see on the graph, I mean, obviously Europe has been using it quite intensively, as has parts of China, your Indian kind of section with especially around where the cotton is grown. And then in America, your literally your Midwest American kind of corn belt. Now, it's quite important to take a look, and well, at least to remember those places, because you'll see the correlation coming up on the following slides. I hope when this comes out, our screen, the screen with the two of us on it has shifted out the way, because this graph shows 400,000 years of your carbon cycle, where we do have natural increases and then peaks and troughs in carbon dioxide. But what we would have seen from 1950 is that we have now way overshot that. If the box doesn't move, you can have a look and kind of see that where we are, where the 400 and the 420 markers, we are currently at 417 parts per million. So we really have overshot the 300 that would have been the peak on any of the natural cycles that have preceded us. The biodiversity loss that we're experiencing, you'll see that it mirrors to a large extent where this chemical fertilizer type style of farming has been carried out. Now, the fertilizer style type of farming, more eloquently is put, as your industrial model of agriculture. In that amount of time, humans who are just over 0.01% of all life have managed to destroy 83% of the wild mammals, and that was a study in May 2018. Better illustrated by this diagram here, where in the center, the dark squares would represent humans. You've got cattle to the left, you've got sheep at the bottom right, you've got pigs at the top right, you've got goats in the middle, you've got horses at the bottom, and those wee little green squares that are everywhere else is what is left of Earth's land mammals. Now, it's been done by weight, but often people say, well, we can't stock the Earth with more domesticated animals. But when you start having a look at a picture like this, you suddenly realize how much we have taken from the environment's space, if that's, yeah. So from 1970 to 2016, we've lost on average, we've lost 68% of the Earth's mammals, birds, fish, amphibians, and reptiles. And that in itself is really, really, really scary. So once again, if you have a look at the nitrogen, and certainly the places where the wildlife and the biodiversity was pushed out, you would be seeing that was about 20 years after the height of, well, actually 20 years after the nitrogen started being thrown out. We also kind of taking carbon and organic matter from the soil, and it's not being replenished. So we have a loss of soil fertility. And once again, if you have a look at that map, and if you have a look at where we've been using the inorganic nitrogen, the two areas overlap to a very large degree. Once again, we have dead zones. This is areas of the ocean that are depleted of oxygen. And you can see that over pretty much from 1980 to 2010, we have a massive, massive increase. So again, have a look at where we started putting out the fertilizers, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and you will notice that that graph matches that same upswing. Islands water quality, just to narrow focus it in on ourselves. This is quite an old picture, but it gives you an idea of, at the time that we were throwing, and actually at the time, this 2014, our use of nitrogen was still a little less than it had been previously because of both the nitrates directive and the crash in 2008, which a lot of farmers cut back on spreading fertilizer. But from all of those pictures, you can see how the planetary boundaries have been exceeded around things like nitrogen. So nitrogen is, I wish I could figure out how to put that little spotlight on, but you're just going to have to look at the arrow. But you have the nitrogen cycle, which is way past the zone of uncertainty and well into the high risk area. this pale green section of this would be agricultural influences, and the black would be other sectors. But it is very, very, very clear that we have well overshot the nitrogen planetary boundary, and we do have to figure out how to pull it back. Now, this all sounds like a bit of doom and gloom, and things are looking a wee bit bleak, but it's not that bad. Chagas published a report, the marginal abatement cost curve, in 2018, 2019. And in it are a series of graphs detailing, amongst others, nitrogen use in Ireland. Now, if you have a look at the left-hand side of the graph, you can see once again, pre-2008, we were throwing out a lot of nitrogen. The first drop here is when the nitrates directive came in, and the second drop correlates with the crash in 2008. Farmers scaled back both on the number of stock they had and on the amount of fertilizer bought. And this proportionately knocked back our emissions almost to target levels. As a matter of fact, if we're having a look at 2005 being the reference year, and we're looking at 30% below that, you can see that in 2012, we were making our CO2 emission target. Unfortunately, we have the dairy quota being abolished in 2015, and farmers responding to the opportunity, and of course the fertilizer use going up again. Now there's 5 or 6 lines on the right hand side, and they just match a different type of scenario. So say, for example, one would be if we increased beef and dairy, and one would be if we increased dairy alone and reduced beef, and then the margins in between. But either which way we look at it, we are never, ever, ever going to make our greenhouse gas emission target. As I say, it's not a pipe dream because we've already made it. We've already been there before. These are the greenhouse gas emissions. Oh, wait, hold on a moment. Sorry, yeah, that was the use of nitrogen. These are the greenhouse gas emissions. So like I was saying, it's very, very clear that there's our 2005 reference year, and we came in well below that. Our ammonia emissions, which of course come 99% from animal agriculture, or from at least the agricultural sector. Once again, our target is met down at this point where we reduce numbers and reduce the amount of nitrogen. But if we carry on the trajectory of Foodwise 2025, I mean, yeah, and Harvest 2020, and the government is talking about a new ambitious industry-led program coming up at the end of this year, we can certainly, without any doubt, see that we are never going to make our ammonia targets. This picture here is around the Sligo area where I live, and it is a current status of the river water bodies. The green obviously is in good health, and the red is at risk. This picture is exactly the same place, but with the filter on for the period of 2010 to 2015, when we had that very, very, very low nitrate amount being spread. And you can see the difference. I'm just going to go backwards and forwards between the red and the blue and the green. There's a massive difference. This is a lovely website. If anybody has any time, go and have a look at it. It's watercatchments.ie. And yeah, I must admit, I just love maps and filters. But the current agricultural pressures are mapped here in purple. So of the rivers that are, the river or the water bodies that are at risk from agriculture, they show up in purple. And the forestry ones in the same area are showing up in brown. So it's very, very, very clear to see the agriculture and the forestry impact on our water. This map is a picture of down in the southeast where we have intensive dairy. And you can see that is with the agricultural pressures, but I mean, the state of our water at this stage is, one can understand, I mean, the EPA, I think their report came out yesterday, but our water bodies are in a dire state at this stage. And as I say, I mean, if you go back to having a look at the time where there was no nitrates, there's a very, very, very clear correlation between the water bodies clearing up and the water bodies being very, very, very damaged. This is a picture of extensive farming practices. So I took a screenshot of the, that's out in Mayo, extensive land where cattle and sheep would be out grazing extensively. And the difference, once again, to the rivers is phenomenal. So how am I doing there for time breed? Sorry, you might just have to unmute yourself.
Oh,
there.
yes. Yeah, no, it's good. I haven't really been timing it, but just continue on. It's very interesting.
Good. Well, there's one last thing that I wanted to kind of put in here, is that a lot of the time farmers will turn around and say, well, look, this is all very well, you know, and it's all very well to have aspirations and to, you know, in a perfect world, things would be different. And what I want to say is that they also turn around and say, well, we need to feed the world. And this is the way we feed the world. This is the only way that we're going to be able to feed the world. And I'm obviously very aware of the fact that many of your other speakers are going to be speaking to the fact that this is not true. That there are a lot of other different ways that we could be farming that are much closer to nature, that works with nature rather than against nature. But if we had to go for that argument of, well, we're feeding the world, so we have to carry on doing it this way, then what I want to do is I want to show you how we've been feeding the world and the impact then on our diets. So this is just something I picked off YouTube. It is a study on adult obesity between 1976 and 2014. And as I say, I mean, these days one finds that child obesity is as high as adult obesity, if not higher. And fatty liver disease is actually coming in as a childhood condition at this stage. But if you have a look in 1976, that was where we are. So white, yellow, orange, and then we start heading off to the red for the percentages starting to rise. So we have 1976. We have 1980, we have 1990. At this stage, I think we're starting to see a lot of 15 to 20% of adults being obese. 2000, we are now 20 to 25, and we actually 25 to 30%. 2010, we are now over 30%. 2014, we have a first world planet of people, or people from the first world, or what they consider a developed country, who has been eating food produced under the industrial model. And quite honestly, it hasn't fed us very well. All right, so as I say, I mean, I would be hoping a lot more of your speakers would speak to the issue of the fact that we need not only food, but we need food that nourishes us. We need food that actually makes us healthy, because this type of food does not make us healthy. And quite honestly, I mean, we've seen that. We've seen that along with say, for example, COVID, patients that have diabetes, cardiovascular problems, people who are overweight, they are the people who are having some of the worst outcomes. Diet is related to health. And I think it's really, really important that we start challenging the idea that the industrial model, and especially chemical nitrogen, is the only way that we can go out and make food to feed people.
Oh, thank you, Bridget. Here. I think what you're hitting on, because of the overproduction, I guess nitrogen makes the grass grow fast. You know, more grass, more grazing platforms. Your grazing platforms versus a field versus granny's field. That's what, you know, they're the two level ends of the spectrum I see very clearly. But thank you for Hedge School of Farming with Bridget Murphy and Talamh Bio TV here and YouTube. So yeah, thanks for that, Bridget. And we'll see you here during the day on Twitter, or yeah, maybe get back on Twitter, Bridget. Yeah, a lot to say. Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you. All right. Take care, Brita.
Bye.